I never thought a glass of water would change my entire life. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night, and I'd just gotten back from a 3-day business trip to Seattle. The house was dark except for the soft glow coming from our living room, and I could hear Lauren's voice mixed with her friends' laughter. Her weekly girls' night was still going strong. I should have announced myself. I should have walked straight into that room and kissed my wife hello like any normal husband would. Instead, something made me pause at the bottom of the stairs. Maybe it was the tone of their conversation, or maybe it was the way Lauren's voice carried that particular edge it got when she'd had too much wine. Whatever it was, I found myself standing there in the shadows, listening. God, you should see his face when he comes home from these trips, Lauren was saying, her words slightly slurred. He's so eager to tell me about his boring meetings and his boring clients, like I actually care about software development. Her friends giggled, and I felt a familiar pang of hurt. We had been married for 8 years, and I thought she at least pretended to be interested in my work. I was about to step forward when her friend Jessica spoke up. At least he makes good money. That's something, right? Oh, absolutely, Lauren replied, and I could hear the clink of wine glasses. The money is the only reason I'm still here, honestly. Well, that and the fact that he's too stupid to realize I've been fucking Brandon for the past 6 months. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the wall. Brandon. My best friend since college. The guy who'd been our contractor for the past year, renovating our kitchen and bathroom. The guy who came over for dinner every Sunday. The guy who was supposed to be in my wedding party when we renewed our vows next year. Lauren! This was Melissa's voice, shocked but delighted. You didn't tell us it was Brandon. Girls, it's been incredible, Lauren continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried perfectly to where I stood frozen. He knows exactly what he's doing, if you know what I mean. And the best part? Caleb actually pays him to come over and fuck me. We do it right here in our bed while he's at work, sometimes on the kitchen counter he just installed. The laughter that followed was like glass breaking in my chest. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of trust, of building a life together, of planning for children that she kept postponing. 8 years of believing that this woman loved me, respected me, saw me as her partner and equal. How do you keep it secret? This was Rachel, always the practical one. Easy! Caleb travels constantly, and when he's home, he's glued to his computer. I just tell him Brandon needs to come by to check on the renovation progress or fix something small. Caleb doesn't question it because he trusts Brandon completely. It's actually hilarious how naive he is. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against the wall, trying to steady myself, trying to process what I was hearing. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated betrayal by the two people I trusted most in the world, and they thought I was too stupid to figure it out. What's your end game? Jessica asked. Are you going to leave him for Brandon? Lauren's laugh was sharp and cold. Are you kidding? Brandon is fun, but he's a contractor. Caleb makes 3 times what Brandon makes, and he's already put my name on everything. The house, the investments, even his retirement accounts. I'd be insane to give that up. No, I'm going to keep riding this gravy train until I figure out how to get even more out of it. That's so smart, Melissa cooed. You're like using your assets to your advantage. Exactly. And honestly, the sex with Brandon is just a bonus. The real thrill is knowing that I'm getting away with it. Every time Caleb comes home with flowers or plans some romantic dinner, I think about how clueless he is. It's like having a secret superpower. I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. The taste of blood filled my mouth, sharp and metallic. This woman, the woman I'd promised to love and cherish for the rest of my life, was talking about me like I was some kind of joke. Like I was a meal ticket with legs, too pathetic to deserve basic honesty or respect. "You're terrible," Rachel said, but she was laughing. "What if he finds out?" "He won't. Trust me. I know Caleb better than anyone. He sees what he wants to see. He thinks we have this perfect marriage because that's what he needs to believe. Even if he suspected something, he'd convince himself he was wrong before he'd actually investigate." The conversation continued, but I couldn't process any more words. My vision was blurring, and I realized I was crying. Actual tears were streaming down my face as I stood there in my own hallway, listening to my wife destroy every good memory we'd ever made together. I backed away slowly, carefully, making sure not to make any noise. I grabbed my suitcase from where I'd dropped it by the door and crept upstairs to our guest bedroom. I closed the door as quietly as possible and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. 6 months. She'd been cheating on me for 6 months with my best friend, and I hadn't suspected a thing. Every time Brandon had come over to work on the house, every Sunday dinner where he'd sat at our table and looked me in the eye, every time Lauren had been distant or distracted, it all made perfect sense now. But what hurt most wasn't even the cheating. It was the contempt. The way she'd spoken about me like I was some kind of useless idiot, too stupid and trusting to see what was happening right under my nose. The way her friends had laughed along like my pain was entertainment. As I sat there in the darkness, listening to the sound of my wife and her friends celebrating her successful deception, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and consuming, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something cold and calculating. Lauren thought I was too stupid to realize what she'd been doing. She thought she knew me better than anyone, thought she could predict my every move. She was about to learn how wrong she was.
I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Lauren's voice saying those words. Too stupid to realize I've been fucking Brandon for 6 months. I lay there in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling as 8 years of memories reshuffled themselves into a completely different story. The late nights when Lauren claimed she was working on big campaigns. The way she'd started going to the gym more often, buying new lingerie that I rarely got to see her wear. How she'd become distant during sex, like her mind was somewhere else or with someone else. The times I'd come home early to find Brandon's truck in our driveway, and how both of them would seem slightly flustered when I walked in. God, I really had been blind. Around 6 a.m., I heard Lauren's friends finally leave, their voices carrying across the quiet morning air as they called Ubers and said their goodbyes. I waited another hour before I heard Lauren's footsteps on the stairs, heavy and unsteady. She was probably wondering where I was, why I hadn't come to bed. I walked downstairs to find her in the kitchen, still in her wine-stained dress from the night before, gulping water and looking like death warmed over. When she saw me, her face immediately shifted into that familiar, loving expression, the mask she wore so perfectly. "Baby, when did you get home?" She moved toward me like she was going to hug me, and I had to force myself not to recoil. I was wondering where you were. Did you sleep in the guest room? Are you feeling okay?" The concern in her voice was so convincing. If I hadn't heard her laughing about my stupidity just hours earlier, I would have believed every word. I would have apologized for not saying hello, would have explained that I hadn't wanted to interrupt her girls' night. "Got in late," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. "Didn't want to disturb you. How was your night?" "Oh, you know how it is with the girls. Too much wine, too much gossip," she laughed. And the sound made my stomach turn. "Jessica is having drama with her husband again, and Melissa's thinking about changing jobs. The usual stuff." The usual stuff. Not a word about Brandon, not a hint of guilt or nervousness. She looked me right in the eyes and lied without the slightest hesitation. How many times had she done this? How many conversations had we had where she'd stood there knowing she'd been with another man and acted like the loving, faithful wife? "I'm going to take a shower," I said, needing to get away from her before I said something I'd regret. Want some company? She gave me that sultry smile that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me feel sick. I'm pretty tired from the trip. Maybe later. I saw a flash of something cross her face. Annoyance, maybe? Or frustration? But she quickly covered it with understanding. Of course, baby. You work so hard for us. Us. There was no us anymore. There was her and Brandon. And there was me, the ATM with feelings who was too stupid to see what was happening. In the shower, I let the hot water run over me as I tried to figure out what to do next. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to confront her, to demand the truth, to kick both her and Brandon out of my life immediately. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way she'd talked about knowing me better than anyone, about how I'd convinced myself I was wrong even if I suspected something. She thought I had me all figured out. She thought I was predictable, controllable, manageable, the faithful husband who would never question her, never dig deeper, never fight back. What if I proved her wrong? What if instead of reacting emotionally, I played this smart? Over the next few days, I forced myself to act normal. I went to work, came home, had dinner with Lauren on the couch beside her, but underneath the routine, I was paying attention to everything in a way I never had before. Every phone call she took in another room, every text message that made her smile, every excuse for why she needed to run errands alone. It was Wednesday when Brandon called to tell me he needed to stop by to check on the tile work in our bathroom. Lauren was at work, but I knew she'd be home by the time he arrived. I told him I'd be in meetings all afternoon and couldn't be there. "No problem, man," he said, his voice so casual and friendly. "Lauren can let me in. I'll just take a quick look and probably be out of there in an hour." Right. Instead of staying at work, I parked 3 blocks away and walked back to my house. I let myself in through the back door as quietly as possible and made my way upstairs. I could hear voices from our room, Lauren's laugh, Brandon's deeper tone. The door was closed, but I could hear enough. I sat in the hallway outside our bedroom for 45 minutes listening to my wife and my best friend have sex in the bed I shared with her. They weren't quiet about it. If anything, they seemed to enjoy the risk, the thrill of doing it in my house, in my bed, while I was supposed to be at work earning the money that paid for it all. When it was over, I heard them talking quietly. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to catch their words. "He doesn't suspect anything?" Brandon's voice. "Are you kidding? Yesterday he asked me how my girls' night went, and I told him it was just the usual gossip. He bought it completely. I could probably tell him I was having an affair, and he'd find a way to convince himself I was joking." They both laughed, and I felt that cold anger settle deeper into my chest. "Still feels weird sometimes," Brandon said. "It's been my friend for so long." "Don't go getting guilty on me now," Lauren replied, her voice sharp. "It's not like we're hurting him. What he doesn't know won't hurt him, right? He's happy thinking he has his perfect little wife, and we get to have our fun." "And the money doesn't hurt either," Brandon said, and they both laughed again. I crept back downstairs and out the back door before the rage completely overwhelmed me. I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, shaking with fury and humiliation. They were right. I had been the perfect mark, trusting, generous, completely blind to what was happening right under my nose. I'd been paying Brandon to renovate our house while he fucked my wife. I'd been cooking Sunday dinners for the man who was betraying me in the most intimate way possible. But as I sat there, something crystallized in my mind. They thought this was a game they were winning. They thought they were so clever, so careful, so much smarter than the stupid husband who would never figure it out. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. I hadn't built a software company by being naive or stupid. I'd built it by being patient, strategic, and thorough. I'd built it by thinking 3 steps ahead and never showing my hand until I was ready to play it. Lauren and Brandon thought they were playing me, but they were about to learn that I'd been playing a much longer game than they realized. And unlike them, when I made my move, I wouldn't leave anything to chance. The war was just beginning, and they didn't even know they'd already lost.
The hardest part wasn't the anger or even the heartbreak. The hardest part was pretending that everything was normal when my entire world had been turned upside down. But I'd made my decision. I was going to play this smart, which meant playing the role of the oblivious husband a little longer while I gathered the evidence I needed. Every morning, I woke up next to Lauren and had to resist the urge to shake her awake and demand the truth. Instead, I'd kiss her forehead and tell her I loved her, watching as she smiled that perfect, lying smile and told me she loved me too. The words felt like poison in my mouth, but I forced them out because I needed her to believe nothing had changed. I started paying attention to patterns. Lauren's work emergencies happened every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Her gym sessions ran long on Mondays and Fridays. Her girls' nights were every Friday, but I noticed that sometimes her friends would mention things on social media that didn't match what she'd told me they'd discussed. Brandon's visits became painfully obvious once I knew what to look for. He'd text me about needing to fix something small or check on previous work, always when I was supposed to be busy or out of town. I started telling him I'd be working from home more often, and suddenly his urgent repairs could wait until the weekend when Lauren happened to be busy with other things. 3 weeks after that horrible night of discovery, I hired a private investigator. Not because I needed more proof of the affair, I'd already seen and heard enough, but because I needed documentation that would hold up in court. I needed dates, times, photographs, financial records. I needed everything laid out so clearly that even Lauren's expensive lawyers wouldn't be able to spin it. The PI's name was Marcus Chen, and he came highly recommended by my corporate attorney. When I explained the situation, he just nodded like he'd heard it 1,000 times before. The good news is that if they've been this careless so far, they'll continue to be careless, he told me. The bad news is that this is going to hurt to watch. Are you sure you want to go through with surveillance instead of just confronting them? I'm sure, I said. I need everything documented. Every lie, every meeting, every financial transaction. When this is over, I want there to be no question about what happened. Marcus got to work immediately. Within a week, I had photos of Brandon's truck in my driveway on days when I was supposedly at work. I had credit card records showing that Lauren had been buying lingerie and expensive dinners that I'd never seen or been invited to. I had hotel receipts for rooms booked during my business trips, rooms that Brandon had also been checked into. But the worst part was watching it happen in real time. Marcus installed discrete cameras around our house, nothing inside, but enough to document comings and goings. I would sit in my office at work, watching the live feeds on my phone, and see Brandon arrive 30 minutes after Lauren got home. I'd watch them embrace in our driveway like lovers, not caring if the neighbors saw. The psychological toll was enormous. I started losing weight because I couldn't eat. I'd lie awake at night listening to Lauren sleep peacefully beside me, knowing that just hours earlier she'd been texting Brandon about when they could see each other next. I'd catch myself staring at her during dinner, wondering how someone could be so completely different from who I thought they were. The worst moment came during one of our Sunday dinners with Brandon. It was a tradition we'd had for years. Lauren would cook something elaborate, I'd pick out a nice wine, and the three of us would spend the evening talking and laughing like old friends. These dinners had always been one of my favorite parts of the week. That particular Sunday, Lauren made her famous lasagna, and Brandon brought garlic bread from our favorite bakery. We sat around our dining room table, and they acted so perfectly normal that I almost wondered if I'd imagined everything. Brandon told stories about his other clients, Lauren complained about her boss, and I found myself laughing at their jokes despite everything I knew. But then I caught them exchanging a look. It was quick. Just a flash of intimacy and shared secrets. But it was enough to remind me that I was the outsider here. I was the joke they shared, the obstacle they had to work around, the fool who paid for their fun without even knowing it. After Brandon left that night, Lauren snuggled up to me on the couch and told me what a great friend he was, how lucky we were to have him in our lives. She said it with such sincerity that for a moment I almost believed she meant it. Almost believed that maybe she felt guilty. Maybe some part of her still cared about me and our marriage. Then she got a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. Not the polite smile she gave me, but a real smile full of warmth and anticipation. She quickly turned her phone face down, but I'd already seen enough to know who it was from. "Work stuff," she said when she noticed me watching. "You know how it is." I knew exactly how it was. That night, after Lauren fell asleep, I went down to my home office and opened the file Marcus had been building. Page after page of evidence, photograph after photograph, a complete timeline of lies and betrayal. It was all there in black and white, proof that my marriage had been a sham for months, maybe longer. But looking at all that evidence, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not just anger or hurt, but a cold sense of satisfaction. Because Lauren and Brandon thought they were so clever, so careless, so much smarter than me. They thought they could keep this up indefinitely, playing me for a fool while they lived their secret life. They had no idea that every move they made was being documented. Every lie was being recorded. Every cruel joke about my stupidity was building the case that would destroy them both. I closed the file and went back upstairs where Lauren was sleeping peacefully in our bed, probably dreaming about her next encounter with Brandon. I looked down at her in the darkness, this woman who had promised to love and honor me, who had stood in front of our families and friends and vowed to be faithful for the rest of our lives. "Sleep well," I whispered so quietly that she couldn't possibly hear me. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Because soon, very soon, the game would be over. And when it was, Lauren and Brandon would finally understand what it meant to underestimate someone. They would learn that the biggest fool in the story wasn't the husband who trusted too much. It was the wife who thought she could betray that trust without consequences.
6 weeks after that awful night when I first overheard Lauren's confession, Marcus handed me a file that would change everything. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from anywhere Lauren or Brandon might see us. The manila folder he slid across the table looked ordinary enough, but I knew it contained the complete destruction of my marriage and friendship. "I have to warn you," Marcus said, his voice gentle but professional. "This is comprehensive, and some of it is going to be harder to read than others." He wasn't kidding. The affair had been going on for 8 months, not 6, like Lauren had told her friends. It had started during the kitchen renovation, just like I'd suspected, but the timeline was worse than I had imagined. The first documented encounter was on my birthday. While I was at work, Lauren and Brandon had christened our new granite countertops. But it wasn't just the length of the affair that devastated me. It was the scope of their deception. They had created an entire shadow relationship, complete with inside jokes, pet names, and plans I knew nothing about. Marcus had recovered deleted text messages that painted a picture of two people who weren't just having sex, they were having a full-blown relationship behind my back. The messages were like reading a foreign language where every word was designed to hurt me. Lauren called Brandon baby and my love. Brandon sent her good morning texts every day. Texts that arrived while she was lying in bed next to me, probably reading them while I was in the shower getting ready for work. But the worst part was discovering how they talked about me. In their private messages, I wasn't Caleb or even Lauren's husband. I was the ATM, the provider, or sometimes just him. They had entire conversations about my travel schedule, timing their encounters around my business trips and work meetings. One exchange made me physically sick. "Brandon, does the ATM suspect anything?" "Lauren, are you kidding? Yesterday he brought me flowers for no reason and thanked me for being such a good wife. He's completely clueless." "Brandon, good. I'd hate to have to find someone else to pay for our dates." "Lauren, not gonna happen. I've got him so well trained he'd probably apologize if he caught us together." The financial records were equally damaging.
Lauren had been using our joint credit card to buy gifts for Brandon. Expensive cologne, designer clothes, even a watch that cost more than my car payment. She'd been booking hotel rooms for their afternoon encounters and charging them to our account under fake business names. The most crushing discovery was a series of messages about their future plans. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to milk me for everything I was worth before making their exit together. Lauren had already consulted with a divorce attorney on how to maximize her settlement. She had been documenting every asset we owned, every investment account, every piece of property. But they'd made one crucial mistake. In their arrogance, they assumed they were dealing with someone who would never fight back. All of their planning was based on the idea that I would be too heartbroken and naive to protect myself. They underestimated me completely. The smoking gun came in the form of a voice recording. Marcus had managed to plant the listening device in Lauren's car, completely legal since it was registered in my name too, and he'd captured a conversation between Lauren and Brandon that spelled out their entire strategy. I listened to the recording in my office that night after Lauren had gone to bed. Hearing their voices discussing my destruction was like being stabbed repeatedly, but I forced myself to listen to every word. "The key is timing," Lauren was saying. "I need to wait until after she puts my name on the new investment account, but before he gets suspicious about anything." "How much longer do you think we can keep this up?" Brandon asked. "As long as we need to. Honestly, I think we could keep this going for years if we wanted to. He's so desperate to believe in our perfect marriage that he ignores every red flag. Did you know he actually thanked me last week for being patient with his work schedule? He thinks I'm this understanding wife who supports his career. When really, you're just counting down the days until you can take half of everything he's worked for," Brandon said, and they both laughed. "Half? Sweetie, I'm taking more than half. My lawyer says that with his income and the fact that I've been the supportive wife who sacrificed her own career advancement for our marriage, I could get 60% of everything, plus alimony for at least 5 years. And then we can finally be together without all this sneaking around." "Exactly. We'll have enough money to travel, maybe buy that house you were looking at in Colorado, all funded by my stupid, generous husband who never saw it coming." I had to pause the recording because my hands were shaking too badly to hold my phone. This wasn't just an affair, this was a long-term con game, and I was the mark. They weren't just betraying me, they were planning to financially destroy me and then ride off into the sunset together. But as I sat there, in my office, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal and their plans for my destruction, I felt something unexpected. Not just rage or heartbreak, but a cold, calculating clarity. They thought they were so smart, so careful, so strategic. They thought they had me completely figured out. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I spent the rest of the night going through every document Marcus had provided, cross-referencing dates and building a comprehensive timeline. By morning, I had a complete picture of their affair and their plans. More importantly, I had legally admissible evidence of adultery, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Lauren thought she was going to take 60% of everything I'd worked for. She thought she was going to walk away from our marriage with years of alimony and a comfortable nest egg to start her new life with Brandon. Instead, she was about to discover that her stupid, generous husband had been building a case that would leave her with nothing. Every gift she'd bought Brandon with our money was documented. Every lie she had told was recorded. Every plan they'd made to defraud me was preserved in digital amber. The war was almost over, and they still didn't know what had started. But soon, very soon, Lauren and Brandon were going to understand what it really meant to underestimate someone. And when they did, I was going to be there to watch their world burn.
The hardest part of any war is the waiting. For 3 weeks after Marcus delivered his final report, I carried the weight of absolute knowledge while maintaining the performance of blissful ignorance. Every morning I woke up, kissed Lauren goodbye, and went to work like nothing had changed. Every evening I came home,
asked about her day, and listened to her lies with the patience of a saint. But underneath the surface, I was orchestrating the most important campaign of my life. My first stop was Jennifer Walsh, the most ruthless family law attorney in the city. Her office occupied the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, and her reputation for destroying cheating spouses was legendary. When I walked into her office with Marcus's file, she spent 2 hours reviewing every document, every photograph, every recorded conversation. "This is remarkably thorough," she said finally, looking up at me with something like respect. "Most people come to me with suspicions and fragments. You've handed me a complete prosecution." "What are my options?" I asked. Jennifer smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Mr. Mercer, with evidence like this, your options are essentially unlimited. Your wife has committed adultery, which in this state is grounds for an at-fault divorce. She's also committed financial fraud by using marital assets to fund her affair. The conspiracy elements, planning to defraud you in the divorce, add additional civil and potentially criminal dimensions." She walked me through the strategy. Instead of filing for divorce immediately, we would take time to secure every asset, document every account, and build an unassailable legal position. Lauren thought she was going to take me to the cleaners, but she'd made the mistake of planning her crimes in writing and on recorded conversations. The beauty of this approach is that she'll never see it coming. Right now, she thinks she holds all the cards. She thinks she's the one with the secret plan and the strategic advantage. We're going to let her keep thinking that right up until the moment we destroy her. While Jennifer handled the legal strategy, I began the financial warfare. I consulted with my accountant and financial advisor, explaining the situation and getting their advice on protecting our assets. We moved quickly but carefully, transferring funds to accounts that only I controlled, securing property deeds, and documenting every joint asset. The key was making it all look routine. I couldn't suddenly drain our accounts or make dramatic changes that might tip Lauren off. Instead, I made small, strategic moves that looked like normal financial management. I moved money into a new investment opportunity that was actually a protected account. I refinanced our mortgage, putting only my name on the new loan. I adjusted our insurance policies and retirement accounts, all under the guise of optimizing our financial position. Lauren never questioned any of it. Why would she? In her mind, I was the trusting husband who shared everything with his loving wife. She saw my financial moves as securing more assets for her to claim in the divorce she was planning. The psychological toll of this period was enormous. I had to watch Lauren and Brandon continue their affair, knowing that every encounter was being documented, every lie was being recorded. I had to sit through Sunday dinners with Brandon, listening to him talk about his plans for the future while knowing he was planning to steal mine. But I also found a strange peace in the knowledge that justice was coming. Every time Lauren lied to my face, I reminded myself that she was just building the case against herself. Every time Brandon betrayed our friendship, he was adding another nail to his own coffin. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late October. I was supposed to be at a client dinner, but the meeting had been canceled at the last minute. Instead of calling Lauren to let her know I'd be home early, I decided to surprise her. I used my key to enter through the front door, and I could immediately hear voices from upstairs. Lauren and Brandon weren't even trying to be quiet anymore. They were in our bedroom, and they were discussing me. "He actually asked me yesterday if I thought we should start trying for kids again," Lauren was saying, her voice full of amusement. "Can you imagine having his baby when I'm planning to leave him for you?" "What did you tell him?" Brandon asked. I told him I wanted to wait until after the holidays, bought myself another few months before I have to file for divorce. My lawyer says it's better to wait until after the new year anyway, something about tax implications. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to them plan my destruction, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Because while they were plotting their timeline for betraying me, I was 3 steps ahead of them. While they were planning to file for divorce after the holidays, I was planning to destroy them both before Thanksgiving. That night, after Brandon left and Lauren fell asleep beside me, I sent Jennifer a simple text. "Execute the plan. I'm ready." Her response came immediately. "Papers will be ready Monday. Are you sure you want to do this publicly?" I thought about that question for a long time. I could handle this quietly, serve Lauren with divorce papers at home, deal with Brandon privately. It would be cleaner, more dignified, less dramatic. But Lauren and Brandon hadn't chosen the dignified path. They'd chosen to humiliate me, to mock me, to plan my financial destruction while pretending to be the people I trusted most. They'd turned my life into a joke and my marriage into a con game. They'd made this public the moment they'd decided to laugh about my stupidity with other people. Now, they were going to learn what it felt like to be the punchline. "Very sure," I texted back. "I want everyone to see exactly who they really are." The next morning, I woke up and kissed Lauren goodbye like I had every morning for 8 years. But this time, I knew it would be the last time. This time, when I told her I loved her, it was not a lie told to maintain my cover. It was a goodbye to the woman I thought she was, and a declaration of war against the woman she actually was. The final phase was about to begin, and Lauren and Brandon had no idea that their perfect crime was about to become their perfect downfall.
Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away, and Lauren was in full holiday planning mode. She'd been texting constantly about menu ideas, guest lists, and decorations, playing the role of the perfect wife preparing for our annual family gathering. What she didn't know was that she was actually planning her own public execution. I had suggested hosting both families this year, something we'd never done before. Usually we alternated between my parents' house and hers, but I convinced Lauren that it would be nice to have everyone together in our newly renovated home. She loved the idea, seeing it as another opportunity to show off what a successful, happy couple we were. "It'll be perfect," she told me over dinner one night, her eyes bright with excitement. "Your parents haven't seen the finished kitchen yet, and my mom keeps asking about the bathroom renovation. Plus, it'll be nice to have Brandon there too. He's practically family at this point." Brandon. Of course she wanted him there. In her mind, this would be their last performance as the secret lovers fooling everyone around them. After the holidays, she'd file for divorce and start her new life with the money she planned to steal from me. This Thanksgiving would be their private celebration of a con well executed. She had no idea she was planning her own funeral. The guest list was perfect for my purposes. My parents, who had always been polite but never quite warmed to Lauren, her parents who thought she was an angel who could do no wrong, her sister and brother-in-law who had always treated me like I wasn't quite good enough for their precious Lauren, a few close friends, including the same girlfriends who had laughed along with her confession of infidelity, and Brandon, the guest of honor who didn't know he was actually the guest of dishonor. Jennifer had everything ready. The divorce papers were drafted and notarized, the restraining orders were prepared, the civil lawsuit for fraud and conspiracy was ready to file the moment I gave the word. But the centerpiece of my plan wasn't legal, it was technological. You see, one advantage of being a software engineer is knowing how to set up audio-visual systems. Our living room had a beautiful big-screen TV and surround sound system that I'd installed myself. What none of our guests would know,
is that I'd also installed the capability to play presentations from my phone with perfect clarity. Marcus had edited together the most damning evidence into a 15-minute presentation, audio recordings of Lauren and Brandon discussing their plans, photos of them together in our bed, in hotel rooms, in restaurants I was paying for, screenshots of their text messages planning my financial destruction, credit card receipts for the gifts Lauren had bought Brandon with our money. It was a complete documentary of their betrayal, edited with the precision of a legal brief and the emotional impact of a horror movie. The week before Thanksgiving, Lauren was busier than ever. She was shopping for ingredients, cleaning the house, coordinating with our families about timing and logistics. She was also, according to Marcus's final surveillance report, meeting with Brandon almost daily to discuss their post-divorce plans. On Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving, I had my last conversation with Jennifer. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this publicly? Once we proceed, there's no taking it back. This will be traumatic for everyone present, not just Lauren and Brandon. I thought about that question seriously. My parents didn't deserve to be traumatized. Lauren's family, despite their flaws, didn't deserve to be hurt. Our friends would be caught in the crossfire of something they had nothing to do with. But that I remembered Lauren's voice that first night. Too stupid to realize I've been fucking Brandon for 6 months. I remember her laughing with her friends about my naivete. I remembered the text messages calling me the ATM and planning to take 60% of everything I'd worked for. They made this public when they decided to mock me to other people. They made this a spectacle when they chose to humiliate me behind my back. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the real show. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold, with a promise of snow in the forecast. Lauren was up early, bustling around the kitchen in her new dress, a dress I now knew she'd bought for Brandon's approval, not mine. She was humming while she worked, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen from her in months. She had no idea she was humming at her own wake. The guests began arriving at noon. My parents came first, bearing their traditional contribution of homemade rolls and awkward small talk. Her parents arrived together in a convoy of expensive cars, her mother immediately taking over the kitchen with the authority of someone who had never met a boundary she respected. Brandon arrived fashionably late, carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing the watch Lauren had bought him with our money. He hugged me like the old friend he was pretending to be, and I hugged him back like the fool they thought I was. For 2 hours, we played our parts perfectly. Lauren was the gracious hostess, I was the successful provider, Brandon was the trusted family friend. We carved turkey, shared stories, and laughed at appropriate moments. If someone had walked in from the outside, they would have seen a perfect Norman Rockwell tableau of American family life. But I was watching everything with the eyes of someone who knew the truth. I saw how Lauren's eyes followed Brandon around the room. I noticed how they managed to brush hands when passing dishes. I caught the private smiles they shared when they thought no one was looking. And I saw how everyone else remained completely oblivious. My father was discussing sports with Brandon like he was his own son. Lauren's mother was praising her daughter's cooking and her beautiful home. Her friends were taking selfies and posting about what a perfect family gathering this was. They were all about to learn that perfection was just another word for a lie told well enough. At exactly 3:30 p.m., as everyone was settling into the living room with coffee and dessert, I stood up and cleared my throat. Before we finish our meal, I wanted to share something with all of you. Something I think everyone needs to see. I picked up my phone and connected it to our entertainment system. The big screen flickered to life, and suddenly the room was filled with the sound of Lauren's voice from that first night. Too stupid to realize I've been fucking Brandon for 6 months. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that room as 15 people processed what they'd just heard. And in that moment of perfect silence, I looked directly at Lauren and Brandon and smiled. Now, let's talk about what really happened to our perfect family.
The first sound after Lauren's recorded voice finished speaking wasn't a gasp or a scream. It was the soft thud of my mother's coffee cup hitting the carpet.
The second sound was Lauren's sharp intake of breath, like someone had just punched her in the stomach. But I wasn't finished, not even close. "I know this is shocking for everyone," I said calmly, clicking to the next slide, "so let me provide some context." The screen filled with a timeline, 8 months of documented betrayal, complete with dates, locations, and financial records. Every hotel room they'd used, every gift Lauren had bought Brandon with our money, every lie she had told me about working late or going to the gym. Lauren's face had gone completely white. She was gripping the arm of her chair so hard her knuckles had turned the same color as her face. Brandon, meanwhile, had gone the opposite direction. His face was bright red, and he kept looking toward the door like he was calculating whether he could make it there before someone stopped him. "Caleb," Lauren whispered, her voice barely audible, "what is this? What are you doing?" "I'm sharing the truth with our families, the truth about who you really are, the truth about what our marriage has really been for the past 8 months. I clicked to the next slide, and suddenly the room was filled with audio of Lauren and Brandon's most damning conversation, the one where they discussed taking 60% of my assets and laughed about my stupidity. Lauren's mother made a sound like a wounded animal. My father's face had gone stone cold in a way I'd only seen a few times in my life. Lauren's sister was staring at her with an expression of complete disbelief. But the best reaction came from Jessica, Melissa, and Rachel, Lauren's enablers, who had laughed along with her jokes about my naivety. They were looking at Lauren like they'd never seen her before, finally understanding that they had been complicit in something truly ugly. "Stop it," Lauren said, her voice stronger now but shaking with panic. "Just stop it, Caleb. You don't need to humiliate me in front of everyone." "Humiliate you?" I laughed, and it was the first genuine emotion I'd shown all day. "Lauren, you humiliated me for 8 months. You humiliated our marriage, our families, our friendship with Brandon. You turned my life into a joke and shared that joke with anyone who would listen." I clicked to the next slide, and suddenly the room was filled with audio of Lauren and Brandon's most damning conversation, the one where they discussed taking 60% of my assets and laughed about my stupidity. Brandon finally found his voice. "Caleb, man, I can explain—" "Explain what, Brandon?" I turned to look at him directly. "Explain how you betrayed 15 years of friendship? Explain how you looked me in the eye every Sunday while you were fucking my wife? Explain how you planned to steal everything I've worked for?" The room was so quiet I could hear the wind outside. Everyone was staring at either Lauren or Brandon, waiting to see what they would say, how they would defend themselves. They had nothing. What could they say? The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, presented in their own voices and their own words. "I think," said my father, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife, "that Brandon should leave. Now." Brandon stood up so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. He looked around the room at faces that had gone from welcoming to hostile in the span of 5 minutes. I'll call you later, Caleb. We need to talk." "No," I said simply, "we don't. You'll be hearing from my lawyers, but we're done talking." After Brandon left, the real fireworks began. Lauren's mother started crying and demanding to know how this could have happened. Lauren's sister was asking questions about the timeline, trying to understand when her perfect sister had become someone she didn't recognize. My parents were sitting in stony silence, occasionally looking at Lauren with expressions of pure disgust. But Lauren herself was fascinating to watch. The mask had finally come off completely. The loving wife, the gracious hostess, the successful professional woman, all of it was gone. What was left was someone cornered and desperate, looking for any way to escape or shift blame. "You planned this," she said, her voice full of venom. "You've been spying on me, recording me, violating my privacy. This is illegal, Caleb. You can't use any of this in court." "Actually," I said, pulling out a manila envelope, "everything I've shown you today was obtained legally and is admissible in court. My attorney has assured me of that." I handed her the envelope. "These are divorce papers, filed this morning. You'll also find a restraining order requiring you to stay away from our house and an injunction freezing all of our joint accounts pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings." Lauren opened the envelope with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the legal documents. As she read, her face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, rage, and finally something like fear. "You can't do this," she whispered. "Half of everything is mine. I gave up career opportunities for this marriage. I deserve exactly what you're going to get," I interrupted, "which is nothing. You committed adultery, which makes this an at-fault divorce. You used marital assets to fund your affair, which is financial fraud. You conspired with your lover to defraud me in the divorce, which adds conspiracy charges." I stood up and looked around the room at our families and friends, people who had come here expecting a nice Thanksgiving dinner and instead got front-row seats to the destruction of a marriage. "I'm sorry you all had to see this," I said, "but Lauren made this choice when she decided to betray our marriage and mock me to anyone who would listen. She thought I was too stupid to ever figure out what she was doing. She thought she could play me for a fool indefinitely. You were wrong about me, Lauren. You were wrong about a lot of things, but mostly you were wrong to think there wouldn't be consequences for what you did." Lauren's mother was helping her daughter to her feet, both of them crying now. The other guests were gathering their things, clearly eager to escape the awkwardness and trauma of what they'd just witnessed. As they filed out, I heard fragments of whispered conversations. "I can't believe she would do that. Poor Caleb, how humiliating. I never would have suspected. How long do you think this was going on?" Within an hour, the house was empty except for me. I walked through the rooms looking at the remnants of our Thanksgiving dinner, the decorations Lauren had put up so carefully, the evidence of a life that had been alive for longer than I wanted to think about. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "How did it go?" "Perfectly," I texted back. "She's served, she's out, and everyone knows the truth." "Any regrets?" I thought about that question as I stood in our living room surrounded by the wreckage of what I thought was my perfect life. Did I regret the public humiliation? Did I regret destroying Lauren and Brandon in front of everyone that mattered to us? "None," I replied. "They made their choice. They lived with the consequences." Over the next few months, the legal proceedings played out exactly as Jennifer had predicted. Lauren tried to fight the divorce, tried to claim that the evidence against her was invalid, tried to argue that she deserved half of our assets despite her adultery. She lost every battle. The judge was particularly harsh about the financial fraud and the conspiracy elements. In the end, Lauren walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and a reputation in ruins. Brandon fared even worse. I sued him for fraud and conspiracy, and the evidence was so overwhelming that his own lawyer advised him to settle. He lost his contracting business, his house, and most of his savings. The last I heard, he'd moved to another state to escape the shame. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving, I was sitting in my office when my assistant brought me a letter. No return address, but I recognized Lauren's handwriting immediately. Inside was a single page. "Caleb, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did to you, to us, to everyone who cared about us. You were right. I thought I was smarter than you, thought I could manipulate you indefinitely. I was wrong about everything, but mostly I was wrong about you. You're not the man I thought you were, and I'm not the woman I thought I was. I hope someday you can find happiness with someone who deserves you. Lauren." I read the letter twice, then put it in my desk drawer. It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in over a year, but it was too little, too late. Because the truth is, I had found happiness. Not with someone else, that would come later, but with myself. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, smarter than my enemies believed, and capable of fighting back when it mattered. Lauren and Brandon thought they were playing a game with someone too stupid to realize what was happening. Instead, they'd started a war with someone who was 3 steps ahead of them from the moment he discovered their betrayal. And in that war, there had been only one possible outcome: total victory for the man they'd underestimated, and complete destruction for the people who thought they could betray him without consequences. The game was over. Justice had been served. And I had won.